Hello there, good evening, welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation Live, guys. Sorry for the delay in getting started. I was having some major camera issues and then some internet issues and then some other bits of issues. You know what yeah, I've been reading through your live chat whilst we've been going, guys. Look, we're going to talk a lot of things tonight. We're going to talk, obviously, transfers. There's a lot of stuff going around as regards transfers at this moment in time, isn't there? There's a whole host of stuff on the transfer front, with obviously certain people obviously been linked with moves to the club, and it's always going to happen, isn't it? The moment you get a new manager, the moment a new manager comes in, that's when obviously transfer silly season really gets started. You know, when you have a situation where anyone and everyone is linked with the club. We're going to try... Sorry, just turn the light from it. We're going to try and steer away, guys, from the Stephen Naismith conversation tonight. I don't really want to get into the Stephen Naismith stuff tonight. There is the video out on that. If you do want to talk a bit of Stephen Naismith, a bit of Naismith, it is on the channel. There is a video out, guys. So please, obviously, have a look at that. Hello to everyone in the live chat. We've got Airwolf. Airwolf, thank you so much for your kind donation. Wish I could bring it up on the screen, but I can't. £2. Surprised you never moved for Dolby. I mean, that's a good shout, mate. That is a fucking brilliant shout. Dolby, he's a guy who scored goals in the SPL, and if you can score, I think it's 16, 17 he got with Dundee. If you can score them with Dundee United, I mean, how many goals are you going to score with Rangers when you've got a team that creates a lot more chances than Dundee United quite obviously did? So yeah, I agree. That's a cracking shout. So yeah, Airwolf, Aldo in the live chat, One Angry Norseman, Lily, Coop, William Salmon, Alan Gemmell. Who else is in the live chat? I haven't given you a shout out yet. Janet, welcome. Donald, welcome. Liz, my other half, welcome. Love you, babe. Donald, Janet, Aldo, Janet again. Guys, welcome on board. I've got to say, I do appreciate the joke. Someone said about Nectar Triantes going from Sunderland to Hibs for $1 million, and someone asking, do you get Nectar points with that one? I mean, that's up there. That is up there. That's almost Paul Smith-esque. Don't know if any of you watch Paul Smith. Has anyone ever? If you've seen anyone hasn't seen Paul Smith, the comedian, guys, go and give it a watch. It's absolutely fucking hilarious, proper funny. He's a Scouse comedian. He's really funny, really funny. There's a sketch that I've just watched where it's this woman in the front row. She looks about 12. And he talks to the boyfriend. He says, about I've been only looking young, and how long have you been going out? 3 years. And he says, what's her name? And her name's Madeline. And they said, where did you meet? And someone from the audience shouts, Portugal. It's proper crack-up territory, Derby joined Bolton, would have been decent punters cover. Yeah, I mean, I think he would have done that. You know what? I think the thing with Dolby, that as obviously that was shouted out by Airwolf, and now obviously backed up there by Alan. This is a guy, like I said, who scored goals. Where he scored goals for Dundee United, and he would have had a hell of a lot less chances created, at Dundee United than he ever would at Rangers. So you kind of think, what would he do at Rangers if he was at the club? I mean, how many goals would he think? Absolutely. Peaceful Warrior, you've just got yourself banned for that comment. Rude. You don't need to obviously come on and be personal about anything like that. I think that's just disgusting. You don't need to call anybody specky. That's just rude. So you're banned for. You've got a half an hour timeout on that one. I mean, let's Airwolf. I think Airwolf introducing the comment that the thing I want to talk about first on tonight's podcast, which is Nicholas Raskin. Look. Raskin for me. Raskin last night. I mean, let's kind of do a little bit of a Raskin feedback. Evening, John. How you doing, buddy? Obviously, please smash that like sub if you haven't subbed yet. If you want to follow the example of the fantastic Airwolf, £2 super chat. Thank you for that. Look, let's have a little look. At this. How much did Dolby cost? I don't know. I'll find out for you how much Dolby cost. But no, look, Raskin obviously played for Belgium. Started obviously the first game, came on as a sub in the second game, and by all accounts was absolutely excellent. It was really, really good again. Rudy Garcia, who is the Belgian manager, spoke exceptionally highly of him post that Wales game. He was free. Jesus Christ. Bolton got themselves a bargain there. If someone being free is a bargain. Derby was a free transfer. I mean, surely we could have got in there for that one. Definitely. Evening Louder at 55. So look, I mean, Raskin, like I said, he was excellent for Belgium. I think he is, he's a good player. He's a fantastic player. He's had a brilliant season, as Janet says, Raskin got Belgium back on track last night when he came on. That's what Rudy Garcia said as well, that not underestimating what he contributes, but he was absolutely phenomenal last night when he came on to the pitch. Raskin, is a player who is just grown out of all proportion, in terms of how he's been, how he's come on with the club. If you think about Raskin at the start of this season, a lot of fans, a lot of Rangers fans were talking down about Raskin. A lot of Rangers fans were kind of saying that he wasn't good enough, that he needed sold, that he was poor, that he was always injured. But, he came back from injury and he was absolutely brilliant. He was the player of the season by an absolute streak. There was no one quite came close to him. He ran the game against Celtic. He ran several. He even ran. He ran the Fenerbahce game in Turkey. He absolutely ran the game. And then obviously the other, in the Belgian games that we've seen him play, he's had 3 caps so far, and he's pretty much run the game in all 3 of those as well. And the problem we've got, obviously, is, yes, he's been brilliant in Scotland and he's going to attract interest more so from the English clubs than any other, because obviously the English clubs do still keep an eye north of the border. But, at the end of the day, Raskin is someone who is going to move. I honestly believe that he is going to move. I mean, Graham says we need to tie him down to a new contract. Look, I think, to be perfectly honest with you, he's got 2 years left on his contract, and this is the time that you renew or sell. And I would love to, have a situation where we can renew him. I'd love to extend him. I'd love to give him a 3-4 year extension to his deal. I'd love all those things to happen. But realistically, is that going to happen? The fact that we've got EPL clubs knocking on our door, the fact we've got FC Porto now as well knocking on our door for him. Apparently Porto are very impressed with him as well, and they're interested in acquiring his services. I honestly, genuinely, Alan Austin says, Porto owner around Raskin. Guy claimed to have met Raskin in Marbella pub and asked him what was happening. He was half pissed and blabbed Porto were interested and he will see what happens. I mean, look, yeah. I think he will move. I think he will move on this summer. I think the problem we're going to have is that, look, as much as we all want to keep the best players, yeah, Coop, I removed it. Yeah, I put him in timeout because it's rude. Look, fine. Feel free to come on and disagree with me. Feel free to come on and question my opinions. But the moment you start commenting on someone's physical appearance or calling them names, that's when you're gone. Look, I think at the end of the day, he is going to be in a situation where, if we get a substantial bid for Nicolas Raskin, if we're looking at 15, 20, 25 mil for the player, then they're going to take it. Because, yes, the 49ers are putting money into the club to bring players into the club. They're going to do that. They're going to put money in. But as we all know, with the FFP, PSR regulations, you can only spend what you make. You can only spend 82% of your revenue. So, it's imperative that we obviously bring in money, that we actually, sell players and move money on. Because if we don't, I'm going to be allowed to spend, we all, look, you and I would all love Rangers to go and spend 50, 60, 70, 80 million this transfer window, but it ain't going to happen. And I'm not saying it's not going to happen because the 49ers haven't got, 80 million pounds or 60 million pounds, because we don't know what they've got. But the problem is that we can't spend beyond our means, because we therefore become in breach of FFP or PSR, whatever you want to call it. Then UEFA get involved. Then you can face points deductions. You can face being kicked out of competitions. You can face all sorts of regulations and stuff like that. So we have to be careful. We've got to look at sort of how much money can we get for Nicolas Raskin. Now, one of the things we do need to take into account when it comes to Raskin is the sell-on clause that's in his contract. Now, I didn't know there was a sell-on clause in his contract, but there's a 20% sell-on clause. So for whatever we sell him for, Standard Liège get 20% of that fee. So if we sell him for 15 million, they get 3 million, we get 12 million. If we sell him for 20 million, we get 16, they get 4, and so on. You can do the maths, okay? So, I think the fee will be somewhere between 15 and 20. I don't think we get any less than 15, but I don't think we get any more than 20 for him. Airwolf says 20 million for Raskin minimum. I just think that where we are as a club at the moment, where we are at this present moment in time, the fact that he plays in Scotland, I don't think we're going to get much more of 20. Now, if you looked at, say, Matt O'Reilly, who was sold for, I think it was 24 million, he had a few more seasons at the highest, at the top level in Scottish football under his belt before it was sold. So I think, there's a possibility there that 15 to 20 is kind of a realistic, fee for Raskin. Now, it may be, looking at a lot of the transfer deals that are getting done this summer, if you look at the Premier League clubs and you look at, Manchester City, the cheats, signing Rayan Cherki, I think it's 30 rising to 39. You look at Liverpool, looking at the Florian Wirtz deal, that's 118 rising to 124. You've got, other deals out there, looking at sort of, I think it's Sesko, Arsenal offered 20 rising to 25. I think that this deal will be somewhere in the region of 15 million basic, rising to potentially 20 if certain criteria are met. What the modern way of doing things seems to be that, as well as obviously paying the transfer in instalments, you therefore add in what's called add-ons. So if the player helps his new club to qualify for the Champions League, the selling club get a certain fee. If he scores a certain number of goals, the selling club get a certain fee. If he creates a certain number of chances and assists, they get a certain fee. And I think that's the way it's going to work this summer. I think that's how we're going to look. We will talk about Dessers. So I think 15 to 20 million, I think we are going to sell him. I think, unfortunately, that will happen. Now, I would love to keep all of him. He's a brilliant footballer. Absolutely brilliant footballer. And I think he can make a huge difference for Rangers this season. I think, he's the sort of player that Russell Martin would love. He's the sort of player that Russell Martin would look at and say that, yeah, he's a top man. He could control the rhythm in my midfield. He could start my midfield going. He's the sort of player that I really like. Now, I don't think it's any kind of sort of coincidence that as a club, we've already started looking at number sixes at CDMs. So obviously, we saw, I think, what was a very unrealistic link to Flynn Downs for 10 mil. There was the links to Matinho, links to Vicente Pizarro. I think, that there is a situation where, because we're doing this, because we're looking at these players, that I think there is genuinely a belief within the club that, that he is going to go this summer, that there is going to be a parting, obviously, for a substantial amount of money for the player. And look, I would love him to stay. Of course I would. And I'm not going to sit here and say to you tonight, I want Rangers to sell Nicholas Raskin, because I don't, because he's our best player. Why would I want us to sell our best player? The issue, like I said, is we can't hold on to these players because we're not in that position anymore. We're not in the days of David Murray, Graham Souness, Walter Smith, when we could sign anyone we wanted. Yes, that all fell apart very, very like a house of cards. But, we're not on those days anymore. We're not in the days of 86, 87, when we had one of the greatest teams in British football. Those days are gone. We've got to sell our best players. We're in a situation where we want to set up this transfer trading model. We need the money to substantially develop the playing squad, to keep the squad moving forward. And that's just where we're at now. Let's have a look at some of your comments in the live chat. Let's have a quick flick through. We can go back in time a little bit. Tavernier just leaves, says there's no way we will get 15 to 20 million. I think we will. I don't think we should sell Raskin. We should build a team around him. Kyle, I agree. We should, but we're no longer in that era where we can afford to hang on to these players. We're in an era where these players have to be sold because we want the club to move forward. The club has to be self-sufficient. The trading model is there, or it is going to be there. Unfortunately, we are in a position where we are not a club now that is a buying club. We are a selling club, and that's how we are, and that's how it's going to be, unfortunately, because of the European market. We're not in a position where the Scottish game is, or the Scottish clubs are as strong as the EPL, as strong as the Bundesliga, as strong as Spain, as strong as Italy. We can't compete anymore on that financial footing. We've got to sell to buy. Less than 15 million for Raskin. Can't see us getting 20, just my opinion, says Janet. I'm saying 15 mil rising to 20 if certain criteria are met, I think. Robertson says we have to sell him no less than 20 mil. Why we never went for Lennon Miller last summer, baffling. We went for Bayrami instead. Airwolf, that's a great shout, mate. I don't know why we didn't go for Lennon Miller. Lennon Miller is class. I mean, I know it was only Liechtenstein they were playing last night, and I'm not being funny, but Ross County could beat Liechtenstein, but he was class last night. Class. Alan, great shout. We can stick on a 25% sell on if he sells for 40 million the season after we get another 10. I agree. I think we've got to do that. We've got to be in a position where we start to put sell on clauses into contracts. That's the way that big clubs work. That's the way that clubs work. You know, that we put in that. You know, that those sell-on clauses to get money for these players when they develop, when they go on to the next step from that. And I think Raskin, if he goes somewhere like Leeds or Villa or Porto, will then move on to an even bigger club if his progression arc continues. And you know, you could be looking at 30-40 million for the player in 2-3 years' time. So yeah, I agree with that one. I saw Dessers for 2.5 mil. If we sell him for less than 20 mil, then the sell-on clause would need to be higher. I saw they're wanting 5 million for Dessers. We'll come back to Dessers, don't worry. 20 million plus 20% sell-on. I like that. I'd take a can of Iron Brew and a bag of chips for Dessers. Airwolf will take 3 million for Dessers. If Dessers needs to no less than 4.5 mil, says David Penrose. Alexander Cameron says Matondo may be a player Martin looks at but think he's a sellable asset. I think he is. Paul says new owners want a winning team, plenty of other players to sell first. I want to talk about that actually. That's a good point. The old board, this is not the old board. Players will be sold for profit, says Paul. Agreed. Raskin is worth at least 20 million, says Louder at 55. John Hanna says we shouldn't bother much about speculating, as Rangers will most likely do things that we can't foresee, and we're not going to know what's happening till it happens. That's the truth of most clubs, mate. These days, I really do think that. I really don't want us to, but if we do, no less than 20 million for Raskin. Dessa's price 3.75 to 4.4, says Kenneth Elliott. Seen the Douglas Park loyal account on the Doctor Who stream, lol. Inbas, sorry, late. She's our next scorer. Who's she? The Roberts. David says, how are we? Much are we allowed to spend? Sad to say, but Raskin is only worth what a club is willing to pay for him. True. Do you want to lose players for nothing and then moan about Celtic getting more money for players? Once a player's head is turned, you have to let them go. Agreed. Would you buy James Wilson now and then loan him out? Long-term investment. That's a good shout as well. Look, I want to just address that for a minute. You know, I've talked obviously about Raskin and about selling Raskin, and I think that will happen. But look, everyone talks about, you know, well, there's more players need selling before Raskin. Matondo, Dowell, Davis, Tavernier, this player, that Dio. You know, there's a lot. There's plenty of talk. Danilo, McCausland, and we'll talk about McCausland tonight as well. But look, there's loads of people talk about players, you know, obviously, you know, being sold, but you can only sell players that clubs want to buy. And I can sit here and say, right, in order, we need to get rid of Dowell, Cifuentes, Davis, Ross McCausland, you know, then Tavernier, then Dessers, then this player, then Butland, then Kelly. And I can sit here and I can go over a list of, you know, what I think should happen in terms of in what order we should sell players. It's not going to happen. You know, at the end of the day, we can only sell what people want to buy. And if people don't want to buy James Tavernier and they don't want to buy Rabbi Matondo and they don't want to buy Jose Cifuentes, then, you know, but they do want to buy Raskin and Dio and Dessers, then that's the order we have to sell in, because we can't say, oh, hang on a minute, Villa, we're not going to sell you Raskin until we've sold Matondo. Or hang on a minute, Ajax Athens, we're not going to sell you Dessers because we need to sell this player first. It doesn't happen like that anymore, unfortunately. And, you know, look, the player trading model is here to stay. You know, whatever you think of the player trading model, whether you like it, loathe it, whatever, the club want to set it up. The 49ers have said that they want to set it up. You know, so I don't think we're going to have a situation where we can actually decide what order players are sold in. You know, at the end of the day, we are going to have to sell the players that the clubs come in for first. And if they're for sale because the offer is of the right level, then unfortunately, we do have to sell. That's where we are as a club. And like I said, I would love to be able to sit here and say, I want this one, this one, this one, this one to go first, and then this one after that one. It just doesn't happen like that anymore. They're looking for Sente Pizarro and Turgeman. I did, Paul. There's videos out on both of them. So check them out, mate. Check them out. Good players, both of them. Turgeman looks a player. Tall, quick, strong, direct, can score off either foot. Knows where the goal is, got a good goal scoring record, got a good assist record. Looks a player, looks a very good player. Vicente Pizarro looks a ready-made Raskin replacement. I mean, his passing range is good. He's good at his recoveries are good. His tackling's good. He dictates the pace of play. He looks a really good player. Mulligan is another one we should be looking at. Yeah, I mean, he's the Dundee lad. Obviously, I've seen him linked with Charlton in England. I think they just got promoted. So yeah, he's certainly someone I think we should be looking at. Diamonde would thrive in the English Premier League. I think he would, to be honest with you. I think at times the game's a bit too intense and a bit too physical for him in Scotland. I really do. So yeah, I agree with that one. Does Birmingham not want Davis and Tower? I think they do. We need a squad as well as selling. We need backups. I think the problem with our first team wasn't the first team side. It needs improved no matter who was the manager. We could see the last season was a write-off. I agree. Can't see us winning the league with this new season because the mess the club is in. The new owners have to set the foundations. Agree. Definitely think Danny needs a run or needs sold. Talking about Danilo, I think that's a good shout. You did tell me about another pod, Paul. Good shout. Thank you for that. I went away and looked them up and did some videos on them. So thank you, Paul, for your tip-off. Good lad. Matondo has seen off Beale, Gio, Clement and a Hanover manager who wants to take a risk. He's not good for managers' prospects. Neither's Tav, mate. Neither's Tav. If we can sell Tav, which we can't, then just let him go. He's not up to some standards. I love the guy, but he's been a loyal servant. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen, Kyle. Tav's gone 35 grand a week. Rangers are not going to waste, tens of millions of pounds for getting rid of him because they'll have to pay him off. So yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Would you take Patterson back for Diamonde with cash, of course, or a loan? Good shout, Alexander. Yes, I would take Patterson back. Hoping Bailey gets his chance. Airwolf, I agree. Bailey Rice does need his chance to play. And I think obviously if Raskin goes, then obviously Bailey Rice gets more of a look in, hopefully. It's time to sell Raskin. 10 to 15 million only. I think it's a lot more than that, Gaza B. I think 10-15 million is the starting level for Raskin. Okay, let's move on to talk a little bit of Cyril Dessers. Okay, why does Naismith get the hate but McGregor is loved? Matt Gunner, because of what he said. Like I said, I didn't particularly want to talk about this tonight on the pod, but as you brought it up, I will just mention it very quickly just to share with you. Because of what he said, this was what he said, isn't it? Not him. There you go. This is what Naismith said. We owe no loyalty to the new club. There is no history there for us. That was in 2012, talking about Rangers. And I am extremely proud of the actions we took. That was the press conference he did with Stephen Whittaker. I'm disappointed and angry that Rangers Football Club no longer exists in its original form. As I said on the video earlier, their comments a Celtic fan would be proud of. So that's, I think, why he gets the hate that he does, that he kind of is very much following the Sevco line that Celtic take, isn't he? Taking the 2012, that Rangers died in 2012, whereas we all know that Rangers now is Rangers of 1872. There is no difference. Airwolf, you're right. He should have gone after the Europa League final. We probably would have got a bit of cash for him. Goalkeeper via Milinkovic and James Penrice, left back. Josh Mulligan at right back. Dor Turgeman and Luka Jovic and Bojan Mijovski. Kenneth Elliott, that is a hell of a shopping list. It's a nice shopping list. Hell of a one. So we can just keep Tav to the detriment of the club. I think it's a terrible idea. Kyle, Tav fanboys love him, man. They would change the name of the club to Tav FC. Whatever happens, we need to beat the likes of St Mirren's, Motherwell. Yeah, I agree. Leave Wilson at Hearts. Let him know scouts are watching. Then get him around the table in 18 months. Get him developed and get him on a free. Decent shout, mate. Decent shout. Beating Celtic's not the problem. Consistency is. Patterson would take Tav's place. No problem to replace Tav with Patterson, says Kyle. That's a good shout. I think that's a really good shout. Now, on the Dessers situation. Obviously, Dessers has just got married to his fiancée. Congratulations to Cyril Dessers on your wedding. Hopefully you didn't miss her finger with the ring or miss the service or anything else or any other Dessers missing the wedding jokes that you can come up with. Look, the story is that Ajax Athens are very serious about trying to get Cyril Dessers. Ajax Athens are very serious this summer about spending money. They're very serious about bringing in players, and they see Cyril Dessers as being someone that they'd like to bring in because they think he can provide goals for them. They think that is the way to go in terms of moving their club forward. So Cyril Dessers is very much on Ajax Athens' Paul Oracle says Mulligan should take Tav's position. Agreed, Mulligan. I like. He's a good lad, Mulligan. I do like Mulligan. I'll do a bit of research, a bit more research, and do a video into him. But yeah, as we're saying, look. So Cyril Dessers. Now, according to the stories that are currently swimming around, it is that Dessers is, seriously being talked to by those. That he is a player that has been looked at by Athens. Now, according to the stories that are going round, that the Athens are offering around about €5.5 million. So €5.5 million would represent half a million euro profit on the player. So €500,000 in profit on Cyril Dessers. Now, some people say, well, that's undervaluing him considering he scored 50 goals in his last 2 seasons. You can argue that. The only thing that I'd say about that is that 50 goals for £4.65 million, £500,000 profit on the player for a 31-year-old. You've got to kind of balance it off with that. He's 31. He's not 21. He's not 25. He's not in the prime of his career. He's not going to take off. He's not going to get any better. He's only going to decline. He is under contract until about 2027, so he's still got a little bit of time left on his contract. It's either 27 or 28. I can't remember now off the top of my head. So look, I think €500,000 is a good profit on a 31-year-old, and you make your money back on which I think if you'd gone back to the first few months he was at the club, there's not a single one of us would have said that we'd ever make our money back on Cyril Dessers when he was getting booed off by the fans. So I think, looking at it, £500,000 profit would be good business. Now, I understand, people talking about, well, what would you do in terms of the fact that, he scored goals wherever he's gone. He scored goals for us. He scored 50 goals. How do you replace those goals? Well, you look at, like we do at Dor Turgeman, you look at Mattia Fregan, we are looking at replacements. We have got Hamza Igaman, whose development has been stunted by Cyril Dessers, because obviously Igaman could play in the 9 role. And that's a sort of well-known fact. Like I said, and I'm not hating on Dessers here. I'm not going to make comments about him missing chances. I'm not going to make comments about him as a person or as a player. What I'm going to say is this: for those of you here who don't want to sell Dessers, who think we should hang on to Dessers, for another couple of years, whatever, get some more goals out of him, whatever. Right? Let me just take it this way for you, okay? Are we serious about this transfer trading model? Are we serious about setting up this transfer trading model? Okay, so if we're serious, which I think the club are, then taking a £500,000 profit on a 31-year-old is excellent business. Excellent business. Keeping hold of him for another year, 2 years, you're not going to make any profit on him. And then let's say we get to the end of his contract and we look at him and he's 32, 33, and we decide, you know what, we ain't going to give you a new deal because you're 32, 33. You've kind of gone down a little bit from where you were. So he walks for nothing and we get nothing back for him. Or we try and sell him with 12 months left on his deal and you get no profit, because no club, when they look at a player who's got 12 months left on their contract, is going to give you above the market price for the player, because, at the end of the day, they're going to look at it and go, well, yeah, he was worth, say, $5.5 million 2 years ago, but that's when he had 2-3 years on his deal. Now he's got 1 year on his deal. If I sit here and sit tight for a year, I get him for nothing in the summer. I don't have to give you any money. So why am I going to give you €5.5 million for a player that I can get for nothing in the summer? There's $1.5 million. Take it or leave it. So, you're in a position now with the Bosman rulings, with the market as it is, that you've got to look at selling the players when they're at their peak of their value, where they've got 2-3 years left on their deals. And, at the end of the day, like I said, if you're making £500,000 on a profit you never thought about making profit on, for me, it's a no-brainer. It's an absolute no-brainer. It genuinely is a no-brainer. Let's have a look at some of your comments that we've got here. We've got a fair few comments. Apologies if I miss your comment. We could come in. We would come in. Only vultures will be Hearts boardroom. Mr. Fingerlaw. Alexander Cameron says, Kyle, 100% Patterson would take Tav's place in the heartbeat, but if he recovers from injuries, that would be great. And he's number 1 right back for Scotland. True. Check out the FB brief for player stats. Very good place to go. Good shout, Airwolf. Sam Byram is actually linked, would be coming and play right back, because I'm sure that's what he is. He is a right back, Sam Byram. It's the Sam Byram that plays for Leeds, Alexander. He's about 50. I don't really like the idea sound of him. I think he's way too old. Paul McCoracle says, Dessers, yes, 50 goals in 2 seasons. Who's to say you can't hit those numbers again? We need younger, hungrier with potential for a bigger profit. Agreed. And if you can turn £500,000 profit on a player that's 31, you're doing a good job. If we do sell Raskin, are we thinking 4 million for Lennon Miller and 5 million for a centre-back? Should be spent pronto. Alan, I think, you're probably looking at, say, 5-6 million for Lennon Miller. Centre-back prices, I think, would be a lot less than that, given the fact the club are, according to all the rumours, looking at Connor Cody from Leicester. He would cost around 2.5 mil. So I think, you're looking at a lot less than that. And Darling, I think he's out of contract. So you're looking at players who, realistically are not going to cost you those figures. So, decent shout though. Bruges will be a test. Give us an idea of how this team will set up. That's in the friendly, isn't it? Totally agree, Alexander. No disrespect to Tav. As I said, he's been a loyal servant to the club for years. Yeah, I mean, he has been. Look, I'm not disputing. I'm never disputing that the guy's been a loyal servant. I've never disputed the fact that the guy's been a loyal servant to the club. And some of his figures are astronomically amazing. Of course they are. But the situation quite clearly is that he is past his best. He's done and dusted. His legs are gone. He's defensively poor. I saw some pretty amazing stats the other day. Stats today on Tav. These are defensive stats, by the way, on Tav. I just want to share these with you. Now, the first few, you might say, well, that shows he's really good. Well, a couple of them do show that, he's still got something to offer. But the other ones are kind of collective stats. So goals conceded, 33, puts him in the 80th percentile, which is green, okay? Now, yes, that may sound good, but like I said to you, that's a collective stat. That's the whole defence and the goalkeeper that contribute to that. That's not just James Tavernier. Clean sheets, 13. That puts him in the 88th percentile. Again, that's not just a James Tavernier stat. That is a everyone stat. That's a whole defence stat. So, yeah, it is good. No, I'm not denying that it isn't good. 88%, good. Tackles, 84th percentile, 64 tackles, 2.13 tackles per 90. That's pretty decent. That's an individual stat. That's good. Interceptions, 44. He averages 1.47 interceptions per 90, which is in the 92nd percentile, which is good. Okay, decent. So we have got some decent stats. So I'm not saying that as a player, he is a total fucking write-off. Right, let's have a look at the next one. Into ground duels, which obviously is something that as a right back you have a lot of ground duels. You go one-on-one with the guy you're marking. So he has 9.07 ground duels per 90, and he is in the 42nd percentile, which is red. The 42nd percentile, which is red. So that puts him in the lower half of right backs in Europe. Ground duels won. He wins 58% of his ground duels. That is amber, which again puts him about middle of the road in terms of those won. Aerial duels won 55 aerial duels. He wins 1.83 of them, 58%. So again, that's an amber percentile. That's the middle ranking middle road. Dribble past. He is in the 43rd percentile for being dribbled past, which automatically obviously puts him in the lower half of that, which shows that he obviously has some way to go, which is again lower half. Clearances, he is in the 63rd percentile, which again puts him in the lower half. And shots blocked, 62nd percentile, again about middle of the road, lower half. So overall the majority of his stats are amber or red, so that's not great. That's not great, is it? So like I said, the ones that are good other than the tackle stat is a collective stat. A collective defensive stat. So that's where we're up to, I think, with that. Guys, apologies, I can't actually see your live chat at the moment. I've actually got something that's come across my screen. So I'm actually broadcasting to you whilst trying to look at the screen, trying to get rid of this thing that's on my fucking screen that is just ruining this completely tonight. And now it's going to shut down. Anyway, let's talk a little bit more. So, what was I up to? Dessers, like I said, I think with the trading model as it is, I think it is time to sell Dessers. I think it's time to kind of... put a kind of end to the old Dessers situation, isn't it? And kind of, I think, move on and take the money. Take the fucking money and run. Take the money and run, guys. Let's take the money and run. Let's get the £500,000 profit. Now, the other one that we've looked at, that has been looked at, apparently, is Ross McCausland. apparently. Ross McCausland is being looked at. Ross McCausland is around about 1.5 million that Cardiff are looking at Ross McCausland. Now, if we can get 1.5 million for Ross McCausland, that would be absolutely fabulous. I mean, 1.5 million pound for a squad player would be excellent business. So that is definitely something I would take. 1.5 million for McCausland. So that seems to be one that is also going around as well. So there we go. Right, let's have a little look. Scott's Viking says, as much as I want to see Tav away, I think he will shine under Martin with his attacking style. Yeah, but the only problem is Scott's Viking, he's a defender and he can't fucking defend. So where are you playing him? That's the problem. Where is he playing? Now, if he's playing as a right back and he's not defending, therefore he's letting in goals and we're shipping goals again down that side, as I've just shown you those defensive stats, what do we do? What do we do? That's the big question for me. That's the big question for me. So, look, mate, I've got, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, I think he may shine, yes, but he may also be an absolute disaster because he can't defend to save his life, and he's not a good captain. Definitely not. What else have we got on here? Let's have a little look. Some more comments coming through. 75k a week. Tav is our highest earner. 37k a week, mate. 37k a week. Anyone offers 1.5 million for Ross McCausland, throw Matondo in for free. Well, he is Welsh. You never know. You never know. It could be worth it. Getting rid of Dessers, get the Israeli lad in. That would be good trading model indeed. Alexander, you're spot on with that one. Cody has the good experience. He's a leader. Darling is good coming out with the ball. Good with his distribution, says Paul McCorrickle. And look, given the fact that he's spoken about, spoken about wanting to play out from the back and wanting to play a progressive style, then that's good that you're going to get players who can play out from the back. And Connor Cody can play out from the back. Harry Darling can play out from the back. So yeah, you're right on those ones, mate. You're absolutely spot on that. I agree on that. That's a good shout. John Hanna says, we sold a 16-year-old to Newcastle. What does that say about our youth policy, mate? That's a brilliant point, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, Oliver Good. For those of you who don't know, Oliver Goodbrand is a left back that we had in our academy that was exceptionally highly rated. This kid was, talked of as being, one for the future, a real talent at Rangers, someone who could break into the first team and go on to be an exceptional talent for the first team. However, he has been poached by Newcastle United. I think there is some sort of fee in there, going to be involved, a developmental fee, but we've lost him to Newcastle. Now, I think this is a problem we're going to face unless Russell Martin can be the first manager in years to address this, which is the development of youth and the use of youth in the Rangers first team. Then I think we're going to be in a situation where, these good young players are going to continue to leave. They are, and losing Goodbrand is a major loss. This is a top lad. This is a talented lad. And he's a good footballer. And we're going to lose him. We're losing him. And I think, like I said, I think the part of the issue is if you're a young lad and you look at Rangers and you look at the last few years, how many young players, with the exception of Ross McCausland, have broken into the first team and stayed in the first team? And even Ross hasn't stayed in the first team, has he? Obviously there's Finley Curtis, played the odd game, odd few minutes here. Bailey Rice played the odd few minutes here, odd game here. No one's really broken through. So for academy youngsters looking at this, and good academy youngsters who, have been talked of as being really good footballers, they look at the situation at Rangers and go, well, you know what? I ain't going to get any first team opportunities here. Whereas if I go down south to teams that are playing youngsters, and it looks like EPL teams are far more willing to use younger players. You look at the Fodens at Man City, for example. You look at the Nwanieris at Arsenal. You look at the Miles Lewis-Skellys at Arsenal. You look at the, the Trent Alexander-Arnolds, the Conor Bradleys at Liverpool. You look at the, you look at those kids who've come through the systems there and have played first-team football and played regular first-team football. We never know with these youngsters whether they're good enough because they don't get the opportunity to play. So, yeah, that Goodbrand is a big loss, mate. David Douglas, new name in the live chat. Welcome, David, says, get Nico signed on another 3 year to protect the club. Mate, I don't think it's going to happen. I think he will move on this summer. As I said at the start of the pod, I think 15 to 20 million and he'll be gone. I really do. Is Ramsey still manager of Cardiff? I think hasn't Aaron Ramsey gone to play in Mexico? As much as I want to see Tavernier. Matt says we need a good mix of experienced players who know the Scottish football and younger players, so Dessers would be a keep for me. Matt, look, as I said to you, I don't think we can dictate anymore who we keep, who we sell. I think, if the club want to sell players, which they clearly do, to make money, to make profit, to buy new players, then we've got to sell who is marketable. And we may say, well, I want to sell Danilo over Dessers, but clubs may go, well, I don't want him, I want him. And you can only sell what people want, can't you? If you've got a massive cake and a little cake and no one wants the little cake, you can't force someone to buy the little cake, can you? Alan says we need CBs that have 40 to 50 games in them. Agreed. I think that's a big thing for me. You need a settled centre-back pairing, too, that can be there for 40, 50 games. You look at the good Rangers teams of the past, they had settled centre-back pairings. You look at the good teams down south, the Arsenals, the Liverpools, the Manchester Uniteds, they had settled centre-back pairings. I think we need the same. Sell for we. Ross says Matt Gunner. McCausland would be 100% pure profit, says Airwolf. He would be 100% right, mate, because he came through the youth system. David Douglas says Butland has no place in Martin's team. I think this is based on his footwork, on his ability to play out from the back. Martin obviously wants a goalkeeper that can play football, like Ramsdale can, kind of. So I think, there's that, but we haven't been linked with any goalkeepers yet. And I did want to talk about this, actually. So we haven't been linked with any goalkeepers yet. If that's the case, it's Butland v Kelly, and for me, Butland's still better goalkeeper than Kelly. Kelly, for me, is a career backup. That's all he is. He's a very average goalkeeper. Matt says 2 centre-backs who are shit houses. Yeah, good shout. Cody and Darling would help for sure. Need experience at the back. That 3, yes, Suter, absolutely. 3 with them with Suter would be a good shout, mate. I think we should sell Raskin, Igaman and Diamonde for a complete rebuild build, says Singing the Blues. I don't see Hamza leaving this summer. Diamonde and Raskin, could see them leaving. I agree on that one. Loads of comments. Rangers can't afford to hold on to our youth players as soon as English clubs become interested. The best youth will always be poached before we develop them for the first team, sadly. I agree. That is very true, mate. May says Tav's pace has gone and he can't defend. Apart from that, everything else is hunky-dory. True. Alan says half of Southampton has been linked this week. Ramsdale, Aribo and Downs should be about 250k per week there, which is 70% of our wage spend, never mind the fees. Yeah, I mean, that's unrealistic. They're on big wages down there. They're not going to come up here for little wages, are they? Another player that has been linked with a move to Rangers is the Nottingham Forest left back, Toffolo. I think the guy's name is. That's the guy. He's been linked with a move to Rangers. Now, obviously, he's ready to leave. He will be leaving Forest this summer. Now, apparently, we face competition for him from Sunderland, who obviously newly promoted to the Premier League. Obviously, quite a small team up in the northeast. Obviously, look, I think obviously this will become a bit of a battle because they've got EPL football they can offer. We've only got the SPL, but we can offer them European football. We can offer him European football. We can offer him, 50,000 seater stadium, bigger than the stadium of Shite. We can offer, possibility of winning trophies. They can't. All they can offer is a relegation battle. So, I think we've got a lot more to offer in terms of to the player. But this is the guy apparently is left back now. According to reports, obviously it's that Ridvan wants to head back to Turkey. So if that's the case, we do need another left back. We have Hjefte. Now, look, no disrespect to Hjefte. He's decent, but his defensive work is pretty shoddy. And he still needs time to develop. So I do think we do need a left back. If Ridvan moves on, then we do need another left back. Now, Harry Toffolo would, I think, very much fit that. He is leaving Forest, like I said. He went there from Huddersfield. He is a free agent, so he would cost nothing. He would just cost wages and a signing on fee. He is keen on a move to Rangers, apparently. That's one thing that, he was obviously informed about the Rangers' interest. He was, said to be keen on a move to Rangers. But it's now emerged that Sunderland are also interested in the player. So obviously, that's going to obviously hold some of the attraction because it's England, it's the Premier League, it's staying in England, it's staying in the Premier League. But, Toffolo was a decent player at Forest. He was a fan favourite there. He contributed well as on and off the field. He's a decent player. So, I think he would be a good player to bring in. Certainly someone that him and Hjefte could, perhaps form a bit of a rotation there at left back. And look, I think, long term, as many of you've kind of already alluded to, we need a squad. we need a squad. We need at least 2 players for every position, because the season's long and hard. The season, if you end up playing, in the Scottish Cup, in the League Cup, in the league, in Europe, you can play 50, 60 games a season, and you need some depth to squads. Paul McCorrickle says, for a left back, sell Ridvan, get Penrice. Interesting. And Coop is still laughing at the Wankdorf Stadium. Yeah, that's funny. Left back Ridvan is too injury prone. Need a right back too to replace Tav long term. I mean, look, yeah, we do need a right back long term. I think, Sterling would be the man, but he can't stay fit. But going back to Toffolo, I think he would be a good guy to bring in. Like I said, he is a free agent, so he's only going to cost you wages, which therefore leaves more budget still to spend on players. So, I mean, I hope that that's something we can put across. And look, I know I'm slightly biased, obviously been a Rangers fan, and hating Sunderland, but I think, we have got a lot more to offer. We are a bigger club. We are obviously playing in Europe. They don't play in Europe. We can offer potential of competing for trophies. All they can offer is a relegation battle. Better fans, better facilities. We've got loads to offer over them. So hopefully that's something we can use to kind of persuade him. Carl says we should get a good price for Butterhands. You've seen the price of Lurpak these days. Lol. Funny. Ridvan is always leaving but never seems to go, sadly. He does seem to be always going back to Turkey but never seems to go. But I do think, Janet, that it is real this time. Alan says, seen the other report where Ridvan wants to stay, Toffolo on the other side. We think we need to think smarter. We need a fitness coach to help these players get proper fit and lengthy injuries. Yeah, I mean, that is one. I mean, I think Russell Martin is bringing this Rhys Owen, who's meant to be a strength and conditioning fitness coach, isn't he? So hopefully he can have a positive effect on the players and improve the players' fitness. Look, we're obviously looking at defensive midfielders. We're looking at strikers. We're looking at centre backs. Look, the big debate obviously is over Turgeman and Freegan. They seem to be the 2 strikers we're looking at. I'd be interested to know, where we're up to with those and if there's any truth in that. I mean, it does seem to me that the whole Turgeman thing is genuine. Look, there's a lot of reports out there suggesting that we've already had negotiations with Maccabi Tel Aviv, but we've been told that to up our offer. Our initial offer was 4 million apparently. But, I think there's obviously a need to spend a bit more there to get Turgeman. I mean, look, we're looking at, say, 5-6 million there for him. So, obviously sell Dessers for 4.5, 5, use the money to buy Turgeman. You kind of traded off there, haven't you? So I think that's a decent shout. I mean, Turgeman is a player for me. He looks quick, he looks mobile, he looks strong. He looks a decent player. He looks a very decent player. So I must say, I do like the look of him. He does look very, very good indeed. He really does look very good. So yeah, I wouldn't be unhappy with him. I think Turgeman would be a really good replacement for Dessers. Definitely not. Coop says, do we have a new medical team? No, we don't. We don't have any sort of backroom staff. That's why this big debate over. This is why this big debate over the backroom staff has started, mate. This is why this big debate has begun over who is going to be on the backroom staff. Who comes in, who goes out. That's what we seem to be looking at. So yeah, I mean, that's why the Naismith debate started. So I would certainly look at the backroom staff for definitely. What's the situation with Seymour Owen? Graham says Seymour's signed a new he's seemingly signed a new contract with Brighton. So I don't think he's coming anywhere. I think Abdallah Seymour is way out of our price range. Look, you all know, my love for Abdallah Seymour. You can go, if you go back to, some of my first podcasts and, when he came to the club, I did the stupid thing, didn't I, of falling in love with a loan player. But he is under contract to Brighton now. He has got a new deal. His market value is around £9 million. I just think he's out of our price range. He really is. And I think Brighton will probably use him as a makeway in a deal. He's only signed a year's extension. It's that year's option extension that he's signed up to. So he is only going to stay till he's only under contract till June 2026. So I think 9 million is probably about a basic fee for a Premier League player. Some of you might say, well, how can you pay 9 million when he's got 12 months left? Because he plays in the Premier League. That's how you can pay 9 million for him. Because the moment a player plays in the Premier League, you start talking silly money. So he looks a player. He looks a player, but I'd love to have him back. Of course, I'd love to have him back, but it ain't going to happen, unfortunately. You know, he is. I just don't see it happening. You know, I think if we're not going to get Cheney back, we're not going to get him back. That's where it's at the moment. I do believe that. Juicy Bear Gamer says Rangers cannot afford Seaman. Yeah, I think, you know, even with the new owners, like I said, you know, with the fact that we need a number of players, we need to be clever with the money we've got. And, you know, if you look at Leeds United, for example, you know, as has been mentioned by other people, you know, the Leeds have been clever with their money, haven't they? You know, the fact they sold Archie Gray, they sold Jorginho Ruta, they sold Crescencio Somerville for masses of money, and then only bought in, say, 6 players for relatively nominal fees. But those 6 players actually improved the team. I think it was Manu Solomon, people like that. I think that's the way we're going to go. I don't think we're going to spend big money on one player. I think you're looking at a couple of million here, 4 or 5 million there, 6 million there, 8, perhaps 7 million max on a player. And that's the way we'll build. I don't see us going out and splashing 9 million, 10 million, 15 million, 12 million. I just don't see that happening. Not with these owners, not now. I don't see that working. Alan Austin says, I'm less optimistic about Cortez. Clement was talking about players he's seen making money in the future, and Cortez was omitted. I think the injuries with Cortez, Alan, is a massive thing. The amount of game time that man misses is just incredible. And the fact that he seems to be made of China, the moment he comes back from an injury, he gets re-injured again. So that's a big thing for me, mate. Matt says we need 2 centre-backs, right back, left winger, right winger, centre mid, centre attacking mid, and a striker. Oh, and a goalkeeper. It's not that much, is it? It's a lot, mate. It's more than one window's work, isn't it? And I think that's the other way we're going to have to look at this now. You know, the club are going to have to really prioritise what they can bring in this window. And I don't think, you know, 8, 9 players is realistic. I think you're going to be in a situation where we'll perhaps bring in 5, maybe 6, and then say 2 or 3 in January to supplement what we bought in the summer. And then next summer, perhaps another 2 or 3. And that's the way I'll have to go. I can't see this all being done in one summer. Janet says, that's the problem we've had, Owen. All these loan players, and we get on the board with them and they're gone. Yeah, I mean, look, I do believe, Janet, there's an important lesson that we need to learn going forward. No more loan players, that we need to just sign our own players, develop our own players, not only for the transfer model, but for the team as well. So, yeah, I believe that's a good point. Matt says, if we'd done business correctly, we would have had Seema, Cheney and Tillman, who would all make us millions. Good shout. May says, it's up to the players themselves to have a level of fitness required. Any fitness coaches have to do is have something to improve. I think people are talking more about the injuries, mate. Alan Gamer says, similar to a Thai girlfriend, fall in love for a year and she takes your money. Lol. Alexander says, I can't see a Ryan Kent situation again. That was 8 million. Can see it more being built, not spent on one player. Agree. Airwolf says, suspect this is going to be a hard season. Look, I think... Yes, to some degree, you're right, Airwolf. However, I don't believe that they're that much better than us. You know, I read some stat the other day that between Christmas and the end of the season, they dropped something like 22 points. And if we'd been half decent, we could have probably caught them up. But we weren't. We were shocking under Clement. We were shocking under Barry. So, you know, we didn't catch them up. Now, they're not that good. They really are not that good. If you look at the 4 League Old Firm games last season, they won 1, we won 2. There was a 1 draw in that. So we were actually undefeated in 3 out of the 4 Old Firm games. You know, and even the one that they won, they weren't massively better than us. They were better than us, don't get me wrong, but they weren't massively better than us. The League Cup was a fluke. It was a penalty shootout, could have gone either way. And I think, you know, I actually think and I know I'm biased here, but the worst team actually won the cup that day. You know, so I think we're right. I think, you know, we're in a position where they're not that good. They will strengthen this summer, but their record of buying ain't that good, is it? You know, their record of buying is pretty poor. I mean, if you look at who they've bought, Arna Engels is not a patch on Raskin. Adam Eder couldn't hit a cow's arse with the banjo. I mean, Adam Eder makes Cyril Dessers look like fucking Ronaldo. So, you know, at the end of the day, their signings are not great. So, you know, I don't really rate their business. So even if they do sign players, I'm not going to say the players are going to come in and make that team substantially better. So, you know, because I think if you do look at what cost us last season, it wasn't Celtic. It was us. It was us losing to Motherwell, losing to St Mirren, losing to Hibs. That's what cost us last season. It wasn't, the Celtic games that cost us last season. It was losing to the small teams, the shit teams, not putting away the shit teams. That's what cost us last season. Airwolf says, Martin Way playing out too long to blend in. I suppose it could take time. That's the problem. It's how quick he can get his ideas over. It's definitely going to be a season of transition, says Mays. Alan says we should have went for David Affengruber last summer, was OOC out of contract after winning the league with Sturm Graz, ended up with Elche in Liga 2 and helped them be promoted to La Liga. I hadn't looked into that one, that's a good shout. Mentality needs to be the main thing then installed. I don't know who needs to help with that, but they all need to be up for all the games, not just Europa and Celtic, like what Barry said. Alexander, you're spot on, mate. And we were denied a clear penalty. Correct, Mays. Yeah, I agree. They do need a mentality change. They do need a mentality change up. They do need to realise that, playing St Mirren at St Mirren, playing Hibs at home, playing Livy away is just as important as playing Celtic, as playing Fenerbahce in the Europa League, as playing against Tottenham, as playing against Man United. In fact, it's probably more important that we win those games because realistically, we've got more chance of winning the league than we have of winning the Europa League. So, although last season anything was possible in the Europa League, given how shocking Spurs were. John Hanna says, it will be interesting to see how many turn up for friendlies and support the team. Then we will see the Martin effect. I think that's an interesting point you make there, John. Obviously, I think I made a point on the video about Stephen Naismith that there is an apathy towards the team at the moment. I think there is. From reading comment boards, from listening to fans, from listening to you guys, I think there is a bit of an apathy towards the team at this moment in time, in terms of people didn't want Martin, they don't rate Martin, they don't like Martin, and now there's talk of Stephen Naismith coming in. There is an apathy there, and I think the club need to do what they can to turn it around. And people talk about, well, you've got to take the passion out, you've got to take the passion and the emotion out of this. And if Stephen Naismith is the best coach around, then bring him in to help the team. But by that same token, the board and the club have got to develop a bit of a PR brain here and say, right, look, we're in a position where the manager we've appointed isn't popular. He hasn't got a honeymoon period, which he hasn't. Whether you love Martin or you don't love Martin, whether you wanted him or didn't want him, and I'm not here to tell you how to feel. You can feel how you want about it. What I'm here to say is he ain't got a honeymoon period, and he's got very little rope with which to hang himself. And if he fucks up by appointing Stephen Naismith, that's going to shorten that rope, and it's going to decrease the patience factor by tenfold. And then if we go into the first 5 games of the season and perhaps lose 2 out of those 3 or 1 out of those 5, then it's going to get even less. Then in the next 10 games, if we lose another, say, 1, 2, again, he's going to be in a position where by October, November time, he's already under pressure for his job. So he hasn't got that latitude to work with. And he has to be careful. He really does. Airwolf says, can you hear the groans at Ibrox when the ball is played out from the back? True. Remember, it took Ange till October for his Celtic team to get into gear with all the players, with just winning games before it can happen if we see progress. You know what, Alexander? I'm going to make perhaps a ridiculous comment here. I think if people see progress, they'll be all right. It's when they don't see progress that they get angry. Watch Liga Professional in Argentina. Fantastic players and on average throughout the league. Good shout, GD Jers. May says they have to understand who they represent. We're one of the biggest clubs in Britain. Correct. Yeah. Elf, it's a bit like Stadler in the Muppets. I fell asleep in most games, woke up at the end. I think most fans will give him a bit of leeway, not too much, but see how long our patience lasts. Good shout, Janet. Alexander says the slow start from Rangers needs to stop. We need to kick on. We do, 100%. We need to be a first half team as well, not a second half team. Play for 90 minutes, not 60 or 45. If Martin can get results while it beds in, issue arises if his results fall short. Good point, Airwolf. And this is why I think, going back to the topic of the podcast, which is transfer pod today, we've talked about a lot of transfers in, transfers out. I think recruitment and getting the recruitment right is so important this summer. Getting the right players in to supplement this squad. I mean, I'm going to make another controversial statement here. I think core-wise, in terms of players we haven't got a dreadful core in this team. We've just got dreadful players around them and players who kind of had given up and turned off and genuinely just couldn't give a monkeys anymore. and we're a bit fed up with things, I think. If you look at some of the players we have got, I think Raskin, if he stays, is a good player. Diamonde is a good player. Suter is a good player. Hiefte is good going forward. Butland, if he can get back to his best, is a decent keeper. Danilo is a good player. Hamza is a good player. Dessa scores goals. You've got the core of a team there. If you can supplement them with good signings, you can probably get more out of them. And I think the problem was they were surrounded by a lot of very average players and a lot of players who didn't give a shit anymore. And that unfortunately does infect the dressing room. If you've got players that know they're leaving, that don't want to be there anymore, that are fed up, that kind of gets transmitted to the other players. And we all know what one bad apple in a barrel can do with barrel apples. It can turn the whole barrel poisonous. And I think that's what happened in Rangers to some extent last season. I really do. Mason, there's no point in complaining. They've chosen the manager. For the moment, we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. Agree. Look, I didn't like the appointment. I didn't. I would have rather have had someone else, but this is our manager now. We have to get behind this manager. We have to give him every chance to succeed. And like I said, one of the big things is getting the recruitment right this summer. If we don't get the recruitment right this summer, we're fucked. And like I said to you, I don't think we're that much worse than Celtic. I really don't. I really, really don't. Anyway, guys, that's it for tonight. Thank you for being along with me on this over hour-long ride through Rangers transfer policy this summer. Thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. As always, if you've enjoyed the content, please obviously like, comment, share, and subscribe. Thank you to Airwolf again for your super chat. Phenomenal. Thank you so much for the £2. Very, very valuable. Helps the channel keep going. Reminder, we don't charge you for content. Airwolf says, do we have players to play through a high press or an aggressive press? I think Airwolf, that is what Martin will be looking to buy in this window, to bring in players who can do that. I think that is probably the thing we're going to look for. Thank you for watching, guys. As always, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. On the way out, obviously, please remember always, never, ever forget, we are the people.